Hello and welcome to this month's Lunch and Learn on fad diets and trends. My name is Allison Knight and I am the health coach for Employee Health Center. So there's a few current diet trends that have been around for a while. One of the most popular is probably the keto or ketogenic diet, which is essentially a very low carbohydrate diet. There's also a trend called intermittent fasting, which is fasting for either periods of the day or different days of the week. There's the Paleo or the Paleolithic diet, which is essentially based on eating foods that hunters and gatherers would have eaten hundreds of years ago. And then there's the Mediterranean diet, which isn't necessarily a trend, but is a diet that we hear about a lot. And it's kind of the best way to eat if we're going to look at a diet per se. They focus on a lot of plant-based foods as well as healthful fats, and they don't consume many animal products. So first, let's look at the keto diet. So it is a high-fat, moderate protein, and low-carb diet. Typically, carbohydrates are between 20 to 50 grams or less a day. Most people probably need between 150 to 200 grams of carbohydrates a day, so this is quite the cut on carbohydrates. This, of course, means that you're limiting your bread, your grain, your cereal intake, but it also means that you have to limit fruits because fruits contain naturally occurring sugars, which are a carbohydrate, as well as some vegetables, more of those root vegetables like potatoes. So those are cut from your diet. How does it work? So when you're on the keto diet, what your body does is it breaks down its fat into ketones. It's breaking down fat into ketones for an energy source because you are not giving it glucose. Glucose is the preferred energy source for our body because it's easily accessible and easily digestible into that energy. For some, it can actually take a few days to reach ketosis, and for others, it can be faster. It also depends on how much you are cutting your carbs. In the diet, ketones become your primary energy source instead of that glucose. And in a way, this is actually a partial fast because what you're doing is creating an alternative energy source to that preferred glucose. Unlike other diets, the thing that keto diet does have going for it is that it does help maintain your lean muscle mass. In other diets, sometimes you lose your muscle mass, but this does help maintain it. Now, is it safe? The ketogenic diet is not recommended for certain individuals, including those who have pancreatic or gallbladder disease, liver or thyroid conditions, or a history of disordered eating or eating disorders. Short-term complications of the keto diet can include flu-like symptoms, fatigue, not feeling well, sleep problems, insomnia, concentration and focus issues because you're not getting that energy source, as well as constipation because your body is probably not getting enough fiber to keep your GI tract going and regular. Now, long-term complications can include kidney stones, liver disease, and nutrient deficiencies. And this is because on the keto diet, you're cutting out 3 pretty large food groups: the grains, the fruits, and the vegetables, and all of those foods have different nutrients in them. The other thing to consider is that the keto diet may increase the risk of heart disease. And this is kind of dependent on how you choose to do the keto diet. You can do the keto diet that's full of unsaturated fats coming from animal products and the few sources that are plant-based, which are palm kernel, and coconut oils. Or you can choose more monounsaturated, polyunsaturated fats that are coming from base products. The bottom line on the keto diet is it is a restricting eating pattern that can be hard to stick with. Because of this, it can lead to frustration, loss of concentration, constipation, sleep problems, and it can also lead to lots of nutrient deficiencies. It is an effective treatment of epilepsy. It was actually created for children with epilepsy because they found that glucose seemed to trigger more seizures in children, and that by going on a low-carb diet and having their bodies enter a state of ketosis, there was a decrease in the number of seizures. So they saw that the side effect of it might be weight loss, and they remarketed it as a weight loss diet. But really, the keto diet is meant for the treatment of epilepsy, specifically in children, and it's meant to be moderated by both a doctor and a dietitian. More research is needed on the use of it for weight loss efforts. And of course, more studies also need to be done on the long-term effects. It hasn't been around long enough to know what the long-term effects are. Next up is intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is rotating periods of eating with periods of fasting. And there's a few different types. Limiting when you eat can be easier for some to stick with than what to eat or how much. Short-term studies show promising results for weight loss and actually reducing risk factors for a variety of chronic conditions. However, again, long-term effects require more research. Alternative day fasting. So rotating days of eating with days of fasting. On fasting days, no foods or caloric beverages are consumed. This means water, black tea, or black coffee are all acceptable options, but nothing else should be consumed. On non-fasting days, pretty much anything goes, though following healthful guidelines is still strongly recommended. Having an overall healthy diet is good. There's a variation called the 5-2 variation, and this is where you eat normally for 5 days out of the week, and 2 days are restricted eating, 2 non-consecutive days. So this might be a little bit easier instead of alternative eating, fasting. The thing about this, it can be challenging, and side effects can include hunger pains, decreased concentration and focus because you're not giving your body the energy sources, and then overeating on days of non-fasting. Modified fasting is another version. This is restricting the eating to 20 to 25% of your calorie intake on fasting days. Another rule of thumb might be to restrict your calories to no more than 500 calories on days of fasting. Again, 5-2 is another version of this, where instead of alternating your fasting and non-fasting days, you're eating normal for 5 and picking 2 non-consecutive days for restricted eating. There's mixed results on effectiveness. Some people it really worked, others it didn't. And again, there needs to be more research on the safety and effectiveness of this type. And then there's time-restricted fasting, which is probably the most common type that you hear of when you talk about intermittent fasting, and this is restricting your eating to a certain period of the day. So this is typically within an 8 to 12 hour window, and really 8 hours or less is usually that target window. This can be easier for people who eat breakfast later, not first thing when they wake up, and for those who do not snack after dinner. So setting a window of maybe you're going to eat between the hours of 10 and 6, because what it's doing is help creating that fasting length through the night, which most of us have anyway when we're sleeping, but they're extending it. How it works. So periodic fasting triggers the same fat burning process as a low carb or keto diet. However, IF or intermittent fasting may actually be a healthier alternative to the keto diet because you're not cutting out certain food groups. However, weight loss might occur more slowly. For many people, they see a pretty dramatic weight loss at the beginning of keto diet. With intermittent fasting, it's more slow, but slow and steady is more sustainable in the long run. It's easier to stick with, and you're going to see more progress longer. Skipping meals and limiting intake, though, can be dangerous for people with certain conditions. Pregnant women shouldn't do it. People who have diabetes shouldn't, people who are on certain medications. So it's definitely something that you need to talk to your primary care provider about before doing. Next is the Paleolithic diet. This is also called the caveman or Stonehenge diet. And essentially the premise is to eat like our ancestors and only eat what can be hunted, fished, or gathered. This means that there are no grains, dairy, legumes, salt, or sugar in the diet. The logic of this diet is that the human body is not matched for this type of modern diet, or genetically mismatched, and that recent farming trends and a modern diet are not good for our body. So we're going back to our roots. You can eat fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, and lean meats, meat or wild game, fish, particularly fatty fish, and oils from fruits and nuts. On the flip side, you need to avoid grains, legumes, dairy products, salt, refined sugar, potatoes, and highly processed foods, which we should be avoiding anyway. And this diet also emphasizes hydrating, particularly with water, because that was the only option back then, and being active, because at that time you needed to be able to run away from predators. Now, the concerns with this diet is that it removes whole grains and legumes, which are a good source of many nutrients, including fiber, which the average American does not consume enough of. It also eliminates dairy, which can be a good source of protein and calcium for many. And the biggest thing is that these may also be less accessible and affordable for many. So the bottom line, some trials actually did show improvement with weight loss, as well as glucose tolerance, blood pressure, triglyceride levels, and appetite management. However, once again, potential long-term risks of being on this diet have not been studied. A healthful, balanced diet, including all of the food groups, may be just as effective. And the biggest thing is that this diet might be too expensive and not accessible to make it feasible for many people, because those beans and grains are often good budget-friendly options that are also extremely nutritious. And so that limits some people from having access to these types of foods. Next up is the Mediterranean diet. And I don't really like to call it a diet because it's not a diet per se, but just a way of eating healthy or a meal plan, whatever you want to call it. It includes a variety of fruits and vegetables, whole grains, beans, fish, and healthy fats. It focuses on using plant-based foods as the foundation of meals and having meat or animal products as kind of a side dish. And the Mediterranean population also focuses on physical activity because they walk to most places, and they also make eating a positive social experience. Nowadays, we typically eat our lunch in front of our computer, we eat dinner in front of the TV, we might eat breakfast in the car on the way to work, and so we're taking away that enjoyment of sitting and really enjoying the food we're eating, and we're also removing that company, which can help improve our social wellness as well. And they also focus strongly on those healthful fats, those monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats. They focus heavily on cooking with herbs and spices instead of salt. You can make your own marinades by combining any type of citrus juice, lime, lemon, orange, types of oil, and then fresh or dried herbs and spices. You can create rubs for meat the same way using dried herbs and spices. These are good ways to add flavor to things without adding that salt or extra fat. If you have extra or leftover fresh herbs, you can finely chop them, freeze them in a little bit of oil or water in an ice cube tray. And then those are easily accessible for the next time you're cooking. Dried herbs are about 3 times more potent than fresh, so you can use less, and they're great to be used in sauces like tomato sauce, soups, and stews. Whereas fresh herbs are better for salsas, pico de gallos, dressings, marinades, or as finishing touches like fresh parsley on a pasta dish or cilantro on tacos. Increasing your healthy fats is another focus, so eating fatty fish like tuna or salmon 2 to 3 times a week. Cooking with plant-based oils like avocado, olive, canola, grapeseed. Using nuts as a snack, walnuts, almonds, pistachios, but again, watching the portion size, there still is fat in them and there still are calories. And then using mashed avocado as an alternative to mayo. Does not necessarily taste like mayo, but it has a creamy texture, so it's a similar mouthfeel. You can doctor it up a little bit with lemon juice and some freshly ground pepper. Increase your whole grains and your fiber consumption. Again, fiber is one of the biggest nutrient deficiencies that we have in America. Check the label of the item you are using. The first ingredient listed should be whole grain. So oats, barley, rye, wheat, whatever. First thing should be a whole grain or it's not whole grain. Start your day off with a piece of whole grain toast or a bowl of oatmeal. Some people think that oatmeal is bland. You can add cinnamon to sweeten it up without adding sugar. You can add fresh fruit. You can add sliced almonds, a little bit of honey, a little bit of plant-based milk. Try whole wheat pasta. So swap out 1/3 to 1/2 to start. If you feel like it's too dense, it's got too much of a bite for you, it can be quite a change and it might take a while to get there. Try to make at least half of your daily grains whole grains, and then make a large batch of a grain and then use it through the week. So brown rice, quinoa, farro, or other whole grain that you like, barley. And you can use this for an easy topping or side dish throughout the week. It usually lasts about 5 to 7 days in the refrigerator. You also want to limit your animal products. As we all know, animal products like meat and dairy contain saturated fat, which is the fat that tends to increase our cholesterol, clog our arteries, and it's also found in palm kernel, and coconut oils. Instead, choose low-fat dairy products and try Greek yogurt. Greek yogurt does definitely have a different flavor than regular yogurt. It's typically thicker and a little bit more sour, but the way that it's made, it actually has less sugar than regular plain yogurt, and it contains more protein, so it can be a great dip base, lower in calories, lower in sugars, and also higher in protein to fill you up more. Try eating leaner sources of meat like chicken and turkey in moderation. Consume eggs in moderation, and red meat should be consumed only on occasion. They consume red meat once or twice a week or even once or twice a month. The final word. So many of the current trendy diets may benefit weight loss in the short term, but studies, again, are needed to determine the long-term risks. There really hasn't been a long enough period to determine what these effects might be down the road. The thing about diets is they are often not sustainable, or they can be costly and too restricting. A well-balanced, healthful diet that includes all the food groups may be the best diet out there. If you are interested in making a healthy behavior change, you can contact me via the information below. And this is our last Lunch and Learn for 2020. Hopefully next year will be better. And our first Lunch and Learn topic next year in January will be on getting started and sticking with your goals. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you next year.